There's nothing wrong with thinking outside the box. Like, who would have guessed that a gang of sugary soda chugging, donut devouring bikers would become one of Cobra's most beloved assets? Sometimes the weirdest ideas turn into legends. So it made sense for Hasbro to try capturing that same chaotic magic for the Joe side. But this time, when it came to these dudes, the magic was clearly gone. And not even associating them with Sgt.Slaughter could save this bunch of bland and boring Have you ever wished that you could turn back time and be a fly on the wall during one of Hasbro's brainstorming sessions for new G.I. Joe characters? I know I have. I'd love to hear exactly how the Dreadnoks, those violent, unhinged bikers with an unhealthy love for grape soda and chocolate donuts, went from a wild idea to actual action figures. I mean, who pitched that? And more importantly, who the hell said yes? But as weird as they were, the Dreadnoks ended up being a surprise success story. Year after year, Hasbro kept adding new miscreants to the crew, and somehow it worked. So, of course, it made sense to try and replicate that success for the G.I. Joe side. I mean, you know what they say, right? What's good for the goose is good for the Flanders and all that. So the plan seemed simple enough. Hasbro couldn't just give fans more straight-laced, clean-cut heroes who feasted on cream soda and cronuts. These new guys had to be rough, edgy, and feel like they came straight out of left field. So in 1987, they gave us Mercer, Taurus, and Red Dog, collectively known as the Renegades. As a unit, the Renegades were described as the ultimate off-the-books operation. Their paychecks came from a mysterious Pentagon fund labeled Pest Control, which sounds more like cockroach duty than Black Ops. They didn't answer to anyone but themselves, and technically, they didn't even exist. The Renegades had a level of freedom that the regular Joes could only dream of. No red tape, no rules, and no limit. But there was a catch. If they pulled off the mission, they got no credit, and if they failed, suddenly nobody ever heard of them. The Renegades weren't just deniable, they were disposable. Now, as cool as all that sounded, if you ask me, it kind of feels like someone was just painting by numbers to create a badass team. Still, there's no denying these guys were made to be larger than life. They didn't just look like they didn't belong in the military. They looked like they didn't belong anywhere. But I guess that was kind of the point. These were meant to be the toughest, wildest good guys that the Joes ever brought in. Each one was so bad that they'd already been booted from their previous professions. Taurus was an ex-circus performer, Red Dog a former football player, and Mercer, well, he was ex-Cobra. And to keep this ragtag trio in line, Hasbro had only one Joe in mind. Chuckles. Just kidding. Sgt.Slaughter, who was arguably the biggest name in G.I. Joe at the time. And if you ask me, it made perfect sense. If anyone was going to lead a team this over the top, it had to be the Sarge. And it also seemed fitting since, just like their commanding officer, who was based on a real-life pro wrestler, Robert Remus, the Renegades also seemed to draw inspiration from real-world personalities. Take Mercer. While his action figure had a brown flat top, his card art showed him as blonde, giving him a strong resemblance to Rocky IV villain Ivan Drago, played by none other than He-Man. Red Dog, meanwhile, was supposedly based on Jimmy Superfly Snuka, whom he shared a Polynesian heritage with. Although, if you want to be technical about it, Red Dog was Samoan, while Snuka hailed from Fiji. And finally, Taurus, who was supposedly based on Sgt.Slaughter's own in-ring rival, the one and only Iron Sheik. Anyway, going deeper into their respective file cards gives us even more info on these guys. First up is David Tapu Tapu, named after Cape Tapu Tapu on the main island of Samoa, and codenamed Red Dog, after the old school term for a blitz, which in football is basically when the defense sends an extra guy charging straight at the quarterback to mess up the play. As mentioned earlier, Red Dog was an ex-football player, and more specifically, a barefoot place kicker. who was suspended for excessive roughness after breaking an opponent's helmet and giving him a concussion. To be fair though, the dude grinded his cleats into the Samoan's exposed big toe, so what comes around goes around, I guess. After a brief stint as a stuntman in low-budget action movies, G.I. Joe Command saw something in Red Dog and recruited him into the Renegades. His teammates describe him as the perfect blunt instrument. If there's a barricade, tank trap, or a squad of enemy guards in the way, they just point Red Dog in that direction and wait for the dust to settle. Next up is Varoujan Avazian, aka Taurus, who came from the circus, literally. A former European acrobat who apparently also did the occasional bit of undercover work for Interpol, which I guess worked since who the hell would suspect a guy with a flair for smashing 2x4s over his own face would be employed by an intergovernmental organization that facilitates international police cooperation to combat transnational crime. Anyway, it was Taurus' unique blend of brute strength and spycraft that got the attention of G.I. Joe, who signed him up on the spot. Taurus is the Renegade's resident wild card, a guy who could scale a mountain, crack a safe, or run through a wall, depending on what the mission needed. And finally, we have arguably the most popular of the bunch, and not because he stops hockey pucks with his forehead and opens bottles with his nostrils. Felix P. Stratton, codenamed Mercer, the only Cobra Viper known to have defected to the Joes and lived to tell about it. Mercer originally joined Cobra chasing thrills and fortune, but it didn't take long before he soured on the ideology. His escape from Cobra is the stuff of legend, hot wiring a hydrofoil and blazing across the Gulf of Mexico with Cobra troopers on his tail. But these days, Mercer's a loyal Joe, happy to get 3 meals a day, a warm place to sleep, and a chance to shoot at Cobras. Highly skilled with all Cobra weapons and explosives, he's always ready for payback. If you ask me though, how lucky is it for the Joes that the biggest and baddest of all the Cobra Vipers just happens to defect to the other side? I mean, first they lose their number one ninja, and then their number one Viper. Man, sucks to be Cobra. Anyway, it was pretty obvious that Hasbro had all or most of their proverbial eggs in this Renegade's basket, as aside from pairing them up with their number one Marine, sorry Gung-Ho and Leatherneck, Red Dog, Taurus, and Mercer got a pretty big introduction into the G.I. Joe animated world in the first full-length animated movie that was released straight to video. So as the story goes, after proving himself to be a grade A fuck-up, the equally new and main character of the movie, the Green Beret Falcon, is sentenced to time in the Slaughterhouse, which, despite its rather ominous name, is basically Sgt.Slaughter's very remote training camp. And it's here where we first meet the Renegades, introduced by the Sarge as not really dependable yet, but will be perfect when the Sarge is through with them. We also learn that Red Dog likes to bite his club, Taurus slices fingers, including his own, and while Mercer has venomous spit. Anyway, while their first meeting is pretty rough, Falcon and the Renegades eventually become friends, especially when the Green Beret suggests they infiltrate a Cobra Terradrome with no weapons. Granted, once they do get into the Terradrome, thanks to Mercer, I mean, you'd think they'd change all their access codes on a regular basis. Like, when did this guy defect? Yesterday? The Renegades raid the armory and rig the entire drone to explode. And after rescuing Falcon from a Serpentor slapfest, they all manage to escape before everything goes boom. And that was pretty much it for the Renegades. Yes, they were in the final battle in the end, but I mean, so was everybody else, right? Except Doc, apparently. And Duke, who woke up from his coma. Yay! Unfortunately, despite their big characters, their big association with the Sarge, and their big introduction into the animated movie, for some reason, I think it's safe to say that the Renegades as a concept never really caught on with the fandom. I mean, the first time I saw the Dreadnoks, Ripper, Torch, and Buzzer in store, I had to have them all. I remember not being quite as excited for the Renegades toys, who came conveniently sold in a 3-pack. I don't know, maybe I was just getting older and new Joes in general weren't as exciting to me anymore, but even back then, my impression was Hasbro was just trying to copy the whole Dreadnought shtick for the Joes. So yeah, I never got the original Renegades figures, and I guess I wasn't the only one because after these three, unlike the uber popular Dreadnoks whose ranks grew with a new member added each succeeding year, we never got any more Renegades. Okay, fine, Mercer got one last gasp with a new single-carded bearded figure released in 1991, and apparently there was an unused concept for a new Renegade named Scarhead, a former Cobra captive chained to a Black Panther that never saw the light of day, which is a shame really, but that was it. And moving forward, while we didn't get any more Renegades, what we did get were Marauders. See, aside from the Renegades, another notable addition to the toy line made its debut in 1987, straight from Love Them or Hate Them, Battle Force 2000 was Hasbro's other big idea, which introduced the concept of the sub-team. I mean, I guess you could argue that the Dreadnoks who came out in 1985 were the first sub-team, but as far as I'm concerned, they were more of their own faction, mercenaries hired by Cobra. Anyway, for the sake of dramatic effect, let's just call Battle Force 2000 the first. And while this initial sub-team featured all newly designed and sculpted members and vehicles, Hasbro quickly realized that moving forward they could make a quick and easy buck by simply dialing things back a bit and just re-releasing toys of older characters with new matching or themed decos that signified that they belonged to the same sub-team. And so the following year we got not one, but two new groups. The Covert Ops team specializing in nighttime surveillance and defensive operations aptly called Night Force, and the special jungle unit decked out in tiger stripes, Tiger Force. But we'll probably tackle those two groups in a future video. All you gotta know is that these guys must have done pretty well, that Hasbro decided to keep the ball rolling into the next year with two more sub-teams, Cobra's first, the Python Patrol, and one more for the Joes called the Marauders. Sorry, I meant Slaughter's Marauders. After the concept of the Renegades sorta crashed and burned, I guess Hasbro figured that instead of giving the Sarge a team of brand new characters to take charge of, it would be best to give him a team composed of tried and true previously released Joes instead, united under a new name and a snazzy new color combo of green, blue, and brown. And so in 1989, Slaughter's Marauders were born. The original lineup was composed of Native American tracker Spirit and his Eagle Freedom, and dog handler Mutt and the dog that he handled Junkyard from 1984, the firefighter Barbecue and infantry trooper Footloose from 1985, and finally, the night spotter Lowlight from 1986. But before we get to know all of these new Marauders more, I'd like to get to know all of you even more. What do you think about the Renegades and the Marauders? Are you fans of either of these teams? Let me know in the comments below and tell me your story. Oh, and please like this video, give it a share, and if you haven't yet, give me a sub. It would be very much appreciated. So, thank you. Now, I've covered Mr. Charlie Iron Knight, better known as the Tracker Spirit, along with his, some would say, rather controversial racial stereotype story in another episode that you can check out after this. I'll place a link in the description below. All I'll say is that anytime you can include an accomplished and mystic warrior who can take down ninjas and a bald eagle into any team, do it. Now, while the Marauders no longer had a red dog included in their ranks, they did have a black dog named Junkyard, and of course his handler Stanley R. Perlmutter, better known as Mutt. And I know I say this a lot, but at first glance this guy immediately stood out from the rest of his wave mates, given that he was the first G.I. Joe to come with a buddy, his dog. I mean, yes, I know Spirit also came with Freedom, but only Junkyard was proudly displayed in the card art. And boy, did that dog look like the devil personified in beast form. I mean, just look at those eyes. Throw in two more heads and you'd have a dead ringer for Cerberus from the underworld. Now, Mutt instantly made an impression because aside from his best friend, he also wore a muzzle, which actually made it look like Mutt had a dog face, which is apt because that's actually what his original codename was supposed to be. Anyway, I remember Mutt and of course a much friendlier Junkyard being heavily featured in the cartoons right from the start. In the second G.I. Joe miniseries, The Revenge of Cobra, Mutt and Junkyard went off on a little mini mission alongside Warrant Officer Flint, where they escape a deep chasm infested with mutant strangler vines, get into a bar fight with some off-duty Cobra scum, and meet a shady individual named Shipwreck, who takes them across the desert on his sand boat, where Mutt almost gets lost in a sandstorm, but is thankfully rescued by Flint. In the next miniseries, The Pyramid of Darkness, Mutt and Junkyard pilot the new G.I. Joe space shuttle to the new G.I. Joe space station. Man, that dog really goes places, doesn't he? Where they, along with Dusty, have to take back control of said station from Zartan and the Dreadnoks and an army of fatal fluffies. Yeah, just go with it. One more Mutt-centric episode worth mentioning is Cobra Creatures, wherein Cobra captures Mutt and Junkyard and uses an animal mind control device called High Freak on poor Junk, turning him against Mutt and forcing the poor guy to fight back against his best friend and literally wrestle an alligator just to save him. In the end, Spirit and Snake Eyes, aided by their sidekicks, Freedom and Timber, who can conveniently white out their eyes to pretend that they're being mind controlled, are able to destroy the High Freak device, freeing all the controlled animals, including Junkyard, and all is good. In the toy front, aside from the aforementioned recolored Marauder Mutt, thank God they didn't recolor the dog, we got one more version in 1992, now a part of another sub-team, the Drug Elimination Force, which, to be fair, makes sense. And in 2008, we got an updated version of the OG pair for the 25th anniversary line, one of the very first figures I actually bought for myself. And then we have the dudes from 1985. First up, the firefighter Gabriel A. Kelly, who would have been the coolest fully masked Joe of his wave if it wasn't for Airtight. That being said, Barbecue himself was a pretty nice looking action figure armed with a hose and a little squirt gun. Yes, I know it actually shot out firefighting foam, but whatever, it was tiny and unfortunately easily lost. But the real highlight for this guy was his axe, which was actually really meant for breaking down doors, chopping holes in roofs for ventilation, and breaching walls to access trapped individuals. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if Barbecue used that axe to chop off some Cobra limbs or split enemy helmets. Barbecue's file card painted an even cooler character. He was your basic party animal who could open bottles with his teeth, pick up quarters with his ears, and wrap his lips completely around the bottom of a quart Coke bottle. Yeah. Unfortunately, the cartoon version left a lot more to be desired. I don't know, I just found his voice rather weird. I mean, I was Filipino and growing up had never really heard a thick Bostonian accent, which sounded really odd to me, reminding me more of an old-timey radio voice from the 50s. Or maybe it was just my underlying hate for the Boston Celtics that colored my perception. Who knows? Barbecue did feature in the very memorable episode called The Viper is Coming, which I'll leave at that. Just watch it for yourself. And just like Mutt, we got one more version of Barbecue in 1992 as part of another subgroup, the Eco Warriors, with a much larger squirt gun that actually shot out water. Unlike Barbecue, the original Footloose toy didn't really wow me as a kid. Maybe it was his rather odd name that made me want to kick off my Sunday shoes, or his rather basic-looking green military uniform that looked a bit normal next to his more brightly colored wave mates. It didn't help that his file card described him as a rather odd individual. Andrew D. Myers was the whole package, an overachiever, valedictorian, track team captain, Eagle Scout, and cruising through a physical ed degree on a state scholarship. Until he wasn't. One day he just bailed, moved to the coast, and went full-on weirdo for about 3 years. And then, as he was standing on the boardwalk in Venice pondering something cosmic when the utter pointlessness of his existence hit him between the eyes like a runaway freight train, "I think I'll join the army," he said, and promptly did. Yeah, as an adult, Footloose's life journey made more sense, but as a 9-year-old, I just didn't get it. That being said, Footloose did win me over in the cartoon with his portrayal as a more easygoing, chill dude, often in a zen state of mind, and who frequently was out of touch with reality. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure we all knew what this guy was really on, which would explain all the leaves on his helmet, which to me made him instantly cooler and a favorite of mine as an adult, So much so that I made up for his unfortunate omission in the 25th anniversary line by making my own custom of the dude using the head from a big Darklighter from Star Wars. I mean, he wouldn't be needing it after getting shot down by Vader, would he? And I also fashioned his leafy helmet by using some masking tape. Not bad if I do say so myself. I also did manage to snag myself a G.I. Joe Collectors Club exclusive of the guy later on, before those secondary market prices went crazy. And finally, rounding up the original Marauders team is arguably the coolest. I mean, I know, I say this a lot. Joe, ever, the Night Spotter, Lowlight, who aside from having a cool dark decoed action figure, accentuated by his bright red infrared goggles, came with an awesome sniper rifle and an Uzi. But as cool as his toy was, it was really his story as told in his file card that really put him over the top for me. As a child, Cooper G. McBride was a timid and shy boy afraid of the dark and loud noises. But then during a hunting expedition with his father, Lowlight lost his way in the impenetrable darkness and was found 3 weeks later with a flashlight, his rifle, and a grin from ear to ear. Obviously, this guy was on another level, and even as a kid, I could relate to his story. Not that I was left out on my own in the wilderness for weeks, but that fear of the dark, it's something primal. And the fact that he conquered his fear and his traumatic experience and came out better for it, okay, you could argue that he may have come out a little bit unhinged, but not in a creepy way. But all of that just added to his coolness in my book. And Lowlight's coolness was on full display in the cartoon episode Nightmare Assault, wherein Dr. Mindbender uses his latest contraption, the Zombulator, to invade Sleeping Joe's minds with horrific nightmares. Hawk dreams of gigantic cobras, Iceberg is haunted by gigantic cobras that breathe fire, and Lady J dreams of singing the national anthem at the Super Bowl while not exactly in dress uniform. Anyway, the Zombulator manages to really mess up the Joes' heads, who aren't able to sleep. Except one, Lowlight, apparently the Joe without fear, who overcomes his nightmare of his abusive father. Yeah, apparently that was left out of the file card. And takes on Dr. Mindbender in this dream world and beats him at his own game. And manages to get a good night's sleep out of it as well, so awesome. 1991 gave us another version of Lowlight, now with black locks and full facial hair along with some camo face paint. That same mold was reused a couple years later back to being blonde and now as a dino hunter. Yeah, as if you couldn't make this guy any cooler. Well, apparently you can, as while he was left out of the initial 25th anniversary line as well, Hasbro more than made up for that in spades by giving us possibly the best mainline 4-inch action figure as part of the best 4-inch mainline action figure line of all time. In my opinion, of course. 2011's Pursuit of Cobra. I mean, excellently sculpted figure aside, just look at all the accessories this guy comes with. And all this stuff could be neatly packed up, stored, and carried off into battle, including his bullet case with one single removable bullet. But Hasbro didn't stop there with just giving us a newly minted team. I mean, these guys needed some vehicles to do their marauding, right? And granted, as par for the course, these were all older vehicles re-released with new paint jobs. They thankfully came with new armaments as well. The Armadillo was an update of, well, the Armadillo mini-tank, originally released in 1985, now with more missiles. The Equalizer, a retooled Mauler that traded in its cannon for more missiles. And finally, the Lynx, a retooled Wolverine that traded in its missiles for a cannon. So yeah, mix and match. Whatever works. Anyway, at the end of the day, I can't really say that Slaughter's Marauders were any more successful than Slaughter's Renegades, even if the team was featured prominently in the 1989 cartoon miniseries Operation Dragonfire by Deke. Specifically Lowlight, who actually had a sort of starring role. The show itself was just pretty mediocre at best. Still, the fact that the Marauders were composed of already well-loved characters, I think, gave them the edge over the Renegades. In the end though, I guess you could call all these guys just one big happy family, as in 2011, Hasbro released a special Slaughter's Marauders battle set that incorporated the Renegades Red Dog, Taurus, and Mercer, now going by the names Bull and Mercenary due to trademark lapses, I guess. Along with Vincent R. Falcone, or Falcon, who now came decked in the Marauders brown, blue, and green theme, and a rather extremely update of Spirit, making him look like a dead ringer for Billy from the Predator movie. Anyway, a few years later, those same 3 original Renegades figures were re-released in a 2018 convention-exclusive Slaughter's Marauders Renegades 3-pack, also now in Marauders colors, so I guess that officially made them part of the team. That same convention also gave us an exclusive box set featuring 2 new additions to the team. Well, sort of. First up was the baseball-themed multi-shot grenadier Wilmer S. Duggleby, codenamed Hardball, whose original figure released in 1988 already conveniently sort of came decked in Marauders colors. And second, a new squad leader, Cleveland C. Cahill, aka Sergeant Smasher, who was made because I'm guessing at the time the rights to Sgt.Slaughter were unavailable. Anyway, while you may write off Sergeant Smasher as a calculated diversity swap for Slaughter, in truth, this new guy does have some historical basis, as he seemingly takes inspiration from an obscure cartoon reference, a Cobra parody of Mr. T named Mr. C. And his name was actually the name that Sgt.Slaughter was originally marketed as in many international markets like Europe and India. So yeah, it's fine by me. Anyway, regardless of their general lack of success, I'd argue that of all the many sub-themes introduced towards the end of the G.I. Joe Real American Hero line, the Marauders still rank as one of the more popular ones with the fans. So much so that in the modern 6-inch classified line, they have slowly built up quite a presence, with Sgt.Slaughter, Lowlight, Spirit, and Barbecue all re-released under the slightly tweaked banner of Mad Marauders. And with regular versions of Mutt, Falcon, and Footloose already out, it's pretty much inevitable that they will be re-released in Marauders colors sooner rather than later. And not to be left out, we also have an incoming new Mercer as well, packaged with yet another Sgt.Slaughter, so I'm guessing a 2-pack of Red Dog and Taurus can't be that far behind. To round things up, while they may never reach the same heights of popularity as the Dreadnoks, I think it's safe to say that both the Renegades and Marauders have carved out their own little place in the G.I. Joe universe and have won over the hearts of many Joe fans. And at least, they didn't have to resort to starting a heavy metal band and play hypnotic music to do it. If you want to know more about the crazy dudes behind that crazy caper, the Dreadnoks, I've got their story over here. Or if you want other G.I. Joe stories, I've got this playlist over here. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope you come back for more.